She handed me the crystal flute with shaking hands, her eyes too wide, her smile too bright. She thought I was just a tired old woman ready to be put out to pasture. She didn't know I watched her crush the pills in the kitchen. I didn't call the police. I just waited for her to turn around, and I switched my glass with her mother's. Honey, let me tell you something about survival. You do not get to be a 70-year-old woman with a real estate portfolio worth $50 million by being blind. You get there by watching people when they think nobody is looking. And let me tell you, what I saw at my own birthday party was enough to make my blood run colder than the expensive champagne my daughter-in-law was trying to force down my throat. It was a Saturday night in late October. The air outside was crisp, but inside my sprawling estate in Connecticut it was stiflingly hot. My son David had insisted on throwing this party. He called it a celebration of my milestone birthday, but I knew what it really was. It was a show. It was a performance designed to remind all our wealthy friends and neighbors that the Vance family was still on top, even though I knew for a fact that David and his wife Chloe were drowning in debt. I had seen the notices from the bank that David tried to hide in my recycling bin. I had seen the credit card bills Chloe left on the counter when she thought I was napping. They were desperate, and desperate people do terrible things. I stood by the grand piano clutching my cane, not because I needed it but because it made a very effective weapon if necessary. I watched the room. There were about 50 guests. Men in tuxedos talking about the market and women in gowns judging each other's facelifts. The room smelled of tiger lilies and expensive perfume, a combination that always gave me a headache. David was across the room near the fireplace. He was sweating. It was 68 degrees in the house, but my son looked like he was running a marathon in a sauna. He kept checking his watch. Every time he looked at me, he forced a smile that looked more like a grimace of pain. He looked guilty. I have raised that boy for 35 years and I know his tells. When he was 6 and broke my favorite vase, he chewed his lip. Tonight he was chewing his lip so hard I thought it might bleed. Then there was Chloe, my daughter-in-law. She was 32 years old and acted like she was the star of a reality show that nobody was watching. She was wearing a red dress that was tight enough to cut off her circulation. She was fluttering around the room playing the perfect hostess even though she had not paid for a single napkin. I paid for the party, I paid for the catering, I paid for the open bar. And yet she was acting like she was the queen of the manor. "Victoria, you look fabulous," she squealed, coming up to me. Her voice was high and sharp like breaking glass. "Are you having fun? It is such a great turnout. Everyone loves you." I looked at her. Her eyes were wide and manic. Her pupils were dilated. She was nervous too. "It is a lovely party, Chloe," I said, keeping my voice flat. "You have certainly spent a lot of my money to make it look nice." She flinched just a little. "Oh, Victoria, you have such a dry sense of humor," she laughed, touching my arm. Her hand was clammy. "Can I get you a drink? You do not have a glass. We have that vintage Dom Perignon you love." "No thank you," I said. I am pacing myself. "Oh, come on, it is a toast," she insisted. "The big 7-0, you have to toast. I will go get you a special glass, just for the birthday girl." She did not wait for an answer. She turned on her red stiletto heels and marched toward the kitchen. Not the bar where the bartender was serving guests. The kitchen. The private kitchen where the caterers were setting up the dessert course. My instincts screamed at me. It was a physical sensation like a cold hand grabbing the back of my neck. Why did she need to go to the kitchen for champagne? The bar was 10 feet away. I waited a count of 3 and then I followed her. I did not walk fast, I shuffled. I played the part of the slow old woman. I moved through the crowd nodding at people, smiling politely, but my eyes were locked on the swinging door to the kitchen. I pushed the door open just a crack. The caterers were busy on the other side of the island plating tiramisu. They were not looking at Chloe. Chloe was standing by the prep sink with her back to me. She had two crystal flutes on the counter. One was empty, the other was full. I watched through the crack in the door. I saw her reach into the bodice of her dress. She pulled out a small white packet. It looked like a packet of sweetener, but it was not sweetener. I watched her tear it open with her teeth. She dumped a fine white powder into the full glass. It fizzed for a second and then dissolved. She swirled the glass. Then she took the empty glass and filled it from a bottle of cheap sparkling wine that was sitting on the counter. Not the vintage Dom Perignon she had promised me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt sick, physically sick. I had suspected they wanted my money. I knew they were waiting for me to die. But this was active, this was murder. She took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and pasted that fake smile back onto her face. She picked up the two glasses, the poisoned one in her right hand, the safe one in her left. I let the door close silently. I moved as fast as my old legs would carry me back to the piano. I stood there breathing hard, trying to calm my racing heart. I needed a plan. If I caused a scene now, she would deny it. She would say it was sugar or aspirin. She would say I was a crazy old woman having a senile episode. I needed proof, or better yet, I needed justice. "Victoria, there you are," Chloe chirped, appearing from the crowd. She held out the glass in her right hand. "Here we go, the good stuff." I poured it myself because I know how picky you are about the bubbles. I looked at the glass. The bubbles were rising innocently to the surface. It looked exactly like regular champagne. It smelled like champagne. But I knew it was a death sentence. "Thank you, Chloe," I said, taking the glass. My hand did not shake. I would not give her the satisfaction. "You are so thoughtful." David appeared at her elbow. He looked at the glass in my hand and then he looked away. He could not meet my eyes. He knew. My own son knew his wife was handing me poison and he was saying nothing. That hurt more than the poison ever could. "Let us make a toast," David said, his voice cracking. "To Mom, to 70 years. Yes, to 70 years." Chloe said, her eyes locked on my face. She was waiting. She was hungry for it. She wanted to see me drink. She wanted to see me fall. I lifted the glass. I brought it to my lips. I saw the anticipation in her eyes. "Oh, wait," I said, lowering the glass suddenly. Chloe jumped. "What is it?" she asked too quickly. "I forgot my speech," I said, patting my pockets. "I wrote a little speech for the guests. It must be in my purse over by the window. Hold this for a second, dear." I thrust the poisoned glass back into her hand. She took it automatically. She was confused. This was not part of the script. I turned around. I scanned the room. I needed a distraction. I needed a way to switch the outcome without them seeing. And then I saw her, Barb, Chloe's mother. Barb was a loud woman with hair the color of a traffic cone and a love for free alcohol that rivaled a sailor on shore leave. She was standing near the window holding an empty glass, looking for a waiter. Barb had never liked me. She thought I was a snob because I didn't put ice cubes in my wine. I walked over to her. Chloe was stuck by the piano holding the two glasses, unable to follow me without looking suspicious. "Barb," I called out. Barb turned around. "Victoria, happy birthday," she slurred slightly. "Great party, the shrimp are huge." "I am glad you are enjoying yourself," I said. "Listen, I need a favor. Chloe brought me this drink, but honestly it is too dry for me. I know you prefer the dry stuff. Do you want it? I hate to waste good champagne." Barb's eyes lit up. She looked at the empty glass in her hand and then at the imaginary drink I was offering. "Oh, I would love it," she said. "Where is it?" "It is right over there," I said, pointing to Chloe. "She is holding it for me. Go grab it from her. Tell her I said you could have it. I am going to get a water instead." Barb grinned. "You are a doll, Victoria." I watched Barb march across the room toward her daughter. I stood back in the shadow of a large potted fern. I watched the collision course. Barb walked up to Chloe. Chloe was looking around frantically, trying to spot me. She did not see her mother coming until Barb grabbed the glass out of her right hand. "Thanks, sweetie," Barb said loud enough for 3 tables to hear. "Victoria said I could have this one. She wants water." "No, Mom, do not," Chloe started to say, but it was too late. Barb tipped the glass back and took a massive gulp. She drained half the glass in one swallow. Chloe froze. Her face went from confused to terrified in a split second. She looked at the glass in her mother's hand. She looked at her mother, who was now licking her lips. "That is interesting," Barb said, smacking her lips. "Has a bit of a kick." "What is that?" "Almond." I stood by the fern and waited. I did not have to wait long. It took exactly 45 seconds for the chemicals to hit her system. I counted them. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Barb was still smiling at first, swaying a little to the music, that empty glass dangling from her fingers. Chloe looked paralyzed. She was staring at her mother with her mouth open, her face draining of all color until she looked like a sheet of paper. She knew she couldn't scream. If she screamed "stop" or "don't drink that," she would have to explain why. She would have to admit in front of 50 of the wealthiest people in Connecticut that she had just tried to murder the birthday girl. So she stayed silent. She chose her own safety over her mother's life. That told me everything I ever needed to know about my daughter-in-law. Barb blinked. She frowned and touched her chest. "Whoa," she muttered. "The room is spinning. Is it hot in here?" Chloe finally moved. She took a stumbling step forward, reaching out a shaking hand. "Mom, maybe you should sit down. You look pale." Barb tried to laugh, but it came out as a wet cough. She dropped the glass. It hit the hardwood floor and shattered into 1,000 glittering diamonds. The sound silenced the room. The piano player stopped mid-chord. Everyone turned. Barb grabbed the edge of the piano for support, but her hand slipped. Her knees buckled. She went down heavy, hitting the floor with a thud that vibrated through the soles of my shoes. "Mom!" Chloe screamed. It was a primal sound. A sound of pure guilt. I walked out from behind the fern. I moved quickly now, letting the cane tap loudly on the floor so everyone would see me coming. I knelt beside Barb. She was convulsing now. Her eyes were rolled back in her head and white foam was gathering at the corners of her mouth. "Call 911. I shouted, pointing at a waiter. "Someone call an ambulance now." David ran over, pushing through the crowd. "Mom! What happened?" "Is it a heart attack?" I looked at my son. He was staring at Barb, but then his eyes darted to Chloe. He saw the terror on his wife's face. He saw the shattered glass, and then he looked at me. I saw the realization hit him. He knew exactly what had happened. He knew the poison was meant for me. "I do not know, David," I said, my voice calm and steady amidst the chaos. She drank a glass of champagne and just collapsed. "It looks like a seizure or a reaction." Chloe dropped to her knees on the other side of her mother. She was sobbing, grabbing Barb's hand. "Mom, please. Mom, wake up." "Oh God, I am so sorry." I leaned in close. I pretended to be checking Barb's pulse, but really I just wanted to be close enough to whisper to Chloe. I wanted her to hear me over the panic. I wanted her to know. I leaned across Barb's heaving chest. My face was inches from Chloe's tear-stained cheek. It was a little dry for my taste, I whispered. But Barb always did have a strong stomach. Chloe's head snapped up. She looked at me with eyes so wide I could see the whites all around the irises. She stopped crying for a split second. She looked at the dying woman on the floor and then at the old woman she had tried to kill. She saw the truth in my eyes. She saw that I knew. And worse, she saw that I had done this. "You," she breathed. "You did this." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I turned to the guests who were crowding around, whispering and gasping. "Everyone, please give her some air," I commanded. My voice was the voice of the matriarch, the woman who had run a business empire for 40 years. "The ambulance is on the way. David, go wait in the driveway and flag them down." "Chloe, stay with your mother." David ran. He was a coward and he was happy to have a reason to leave the room. Chloe stayed frozen on the floor holding her mother's hand as Barb's convulsions slowed to shallow, ragged breaths. I stepped back, I watched. I felt a strange cold sensation in my chest. It was not guilt. I thought it would be guilt, but it was not. It was survival. They had brought a weapon into my house. They had declared war. I simply redirected the missile. The paramedics arrived 6 minutes later. They were professional and fast. They loaded Barb onto a stretcher. One of them asked about what she had eaten or drunk. Just champagne, Chloe sobbed. Just one glass of champagne. The paramedic frowned, picking up a shard of the broken glass with a gloved hand. He sniffed it. He looked at his partner. There was a look that passed between them. A look that said, "This is not a heart attack." "We need to get her to St. Mary's immediately," the paramedic said. "Who is riding with her?" "I will go," Chloe cried, scrambling to her feet. I stepped forward. "I will drive, David," I said. "We will meet you there." "Chloe, you go with your mother." As they wheeled Barb out, the party dissolved into whispers. The guests were leaving, grabbing their coats and murmuring about tragedy and bad luck. I stood in the center of the empty room. The shattered glass was still on the floor. I looked at the spot where the poison had spilled. It was bubbling slightly on the varnish of the wood floor. Whatever she had used, it was corrosive. It was nasty. I walked over to the kitchen. The bottle of cheap sparkling wine was still on the counter where Chloe had left it. I picked it up. I poured the rest of it down the sink and rinsed the bottle. Then I took a towel and wiped the counter down. I was not destroying evidence, I was tidying up. After all, I had a long night ahead of me. I walked out to the driveway where David was waiting by my car. He was pacing back and forth, pulling at his hair. He looked like he was about to vomit. "Get in the car, David," I said, unlocking the doors. He got in. He didn't look at me. We drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the rain starting to tap against the windshield. Finally, David spoke. His voice was a whisper. "Mom, yes, David, did you know I kept my eyes on the road?" The windshield wipers swished back and forth, rhythmically, hypnotically. "Know what, dear? That the drink. That it was." He couldn't say it. He couldn't say the word poison because saying it would make it real. Saying it would mean admitting his wife was a murderer and he was an accomplice. I glanced at him. I saw the sweat on his forehead. I saw the terror. "I think Barb had too much to drink," I said firmly. "She never did know her limits. It is a tragedy, but we will make sure she gets the best care. After all, we are family." David sank back into his seat. He knew I was lying, but he also knew I was offering him a lifeline. I was giving him a story to stick to for now. We pulled into the hospital parking lot. The red lights of the emergency room sign reflected in the puddles on the asphalt. It looked like blood. I parked the car. I turned off the engine. I turned to my son. "David, listen to me," I said. My voice was hard now. No more grandmotherly warmth. This was the CEO speaking. "We are going to walk in there. We are going to be supportive. We are going to pray for Barb's recovery. And you are going to control your wife, because if she says one word about champagne or poison or anything other than a tragic accident, I will make sure the police hear about the debts you have been hiding. Do you understand me?" David nodded. He looked small. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing candy. "I understand, Mom." "Good," I said. "Now fix your tie. You look like a mess." We got out of the car and walked toward the sliding glass doors. I tapped my cane on the pavement with every step. Click, click, click. The party was over, but the game had just begun. The waiting room of the intensive care unit at St. Mary's Hospital was painted a color I can only describe as hopeless beige. The fluorescent lights hummed with a sound that felt like a drill boring directly into my temples. It was 2 a.m. We had been there for 4 hours. Chloe was curled up in a plastic chair, her red party dress wrinkled and stained with tears. She looked like a wilted poppy. Every time a nurse walked by, she jumped. She was terrified that someone was going to come out and say the word poison. She was terrified that the police were going to walk through the doors with handcuffs, but mostly she was terrified of me. I sat opposite her straight-backed reading an old copy of Golf Digest. I don't play golf, but I find the pictures of green grass soothing. Every few minutes I would lower the magazine and just look at her. I didn't scowl, I didn't glare. I just looked, and every time our eyes met she flinched. David was pacing the hallway making phone calls. I assumed he was calling his creditors to tell them the inheritance might be delayed. A doctor finally emerged through the swinging doors. He looked exhausted. He was young, probably younger than David, with dark circles under his eyes. "Family of Barbara Miller," he called out. Chloe scrambled to her feet so fast she almost tripped over her own heels. "I'm her daughter, is she? Is she okay?" The doctor sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "She's stable, Mrs. Vance. We managed to pump her stomach in time and we've got her on a dialysis machine to help filter the toxins. She's in a medically induced coma to let her body rest, but the prognosis is cautious." "Toxins," Chloe squeaked. "What kind of toxins?" The doctor frowned, glancing at his clipboard. The toxicology screen was unusual. "We found high concentrations of a substance that looks like crushed oleander mixed with a significant amount of alcohol. It's highly toxic to the heart." "Did she ingest anything unusual at the party? Any herbal supplements? Teas?" Chloe froze. "Oleander, it was a common shrub. We had them all over the garden. It was also deadly if ingested. My daughter-in-law wasn't a master chemist, she was a gardener with a Google search history." "I don't know," Chloe stammered. "She likes herbal tea. Maybe she made some before she came over." It was a pathetic lie. Barb drank gin, not tea. I folded my magazine and stood up. I walked over to the doctor, leaning heavily on my cane. "Doctor," I said, my voice trembling just enough to sound like a worried old friend, "Barb has been confused lately. She's been foraging. She watched some documentary about natural remedies. I told her to be careful, but you know how stubborn she is." The doctor's face cleared. The mystery was solved. It wasn't a crime, it was just a stupid accident by a confused woman. "Ah," he said, "that explains it. Foraging mishaps are more common than you'd think." "Well, if it was self-ingested, that simplifies things. We'll monitor her heart rate. If she wakes up in the next 24 hours without brain damage, she should recover." "Thank you, doctor," I said. "You are an angel." The doctor nodded and went back through the doors. Chloe stared at me. She looked like I had just slapped her and kissed her at the same time. I had saved her from a police investigation, but I had also put her in my debt. Again. "Why?" she whispered when the doctor was gone. "Why did you cover for me?" I stepped closer to her. I smelled the stale champagne and sweat on her skin. "Because," I whispered back, "I don't want the police involved, Chloe." Police ask too many questions. They dig. They look at bank accounts. They look at life insurance policies. And I think if they looked at yours, they might find something very interesting. Her face went white. She knew. She knew I had figured out the motive. "But don't worry," I continued, patting her cheek with a cold hand. "Barb is tough. She'll probably wake up. And when she does, we will have a nice long talk about gardening." I turned and walked toward the exit. "Come on, David," I called out to my son, who was huddled in the corner. "Drive me home, I'm tired. It's been a very exciting birthday." The car ride home was even quieter than the ride there. David dropped me off at the front door of my estate. The rain had stopped, but the driveway was slick and black. "Do you want me to come in, Mom?" David asked. He sounded hopeful. He didn't want to go home to his wife. He didn't want to face the reality of what they had done. "No," I said, "go home to your wife, David. She needs you. She has a lot of gardening to do." I went inside and locked the door. I set the alarm, then I went to the kitchen. I made myself a cup of tea, real tea, Earl Grey. I sat at the island where the poison had been mixed hours before. I wasn't tired, I was wired. The adrenaline was still pumping through my veins. I knew this wasn't over. They had failed once, but desperate people don't stop. They pivot. They had tried the quick way. Poison. Now they would try the slow way, the legal way. I took out my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It was late, but I knew he would be awake. Hartman Investigations, a gravelly voice answered. Frank, I said, it's Victoria Vance. Victoria, Frank said. The surprise in his voice was evident. I haven't heard from you since the merger in '98. What's wrong? You kill someone? Not yet, I said, but someone tried to kill me tonight. There was a silence on the line. Then the sound of a lighter clicking and a deep inhale. Tell me, Frank said, my daughter-in-law poisoned champagne. I switched the glass. Her mother drank it. Frank let out a low whistle. Damn, Victoria, that's cold even for you. Is the mother dead? Coma. But the doctor thinks she'll pull through. Listen, Frank, I need you to dig. I need to know everything, the debts, the loans, but specifically I need you to find the life insurance policy. I know they took one out on me. I need to know the amount, the date, and the beneficiary. I can do that, Frank said. Anything else? Yes, I said. I need you to put a tracker on David's car. And I need listening devices in their house. If they are planning a plan B, I want to hear it before they execute it. Illegal, Frank said. Highly. I'll pay you triple, I said. Done. I'll have a guy there by noon tomorrow to install the bugs while they're at the hospital visiting Mom. Good. And Frank? Yeah, find out if Chloe has been searching for nursing homes. I have a feeling I'm about to become confused and unsafe to live alone. Frank laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. You confused? You're the sharpest shark in the tank, Victoria. I'll get you the info. I hung up. I finished my tea. Then I walked through the quiet house, turning off the lights one by one. I stopped at the mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself, 70 years old, gray hair, wrinkles. To the world, I looked like a victim. I looked like a target. I smiled. It was a wolf smile. Happy birthday to me, I whispered. The next morning, the sun came up bright and offensive. It glared off the polished mahogany floors of my library where I was waiting for Frank's email. I had not slept. I sat there in my silk robe watching the dust motes dance in the light and drinking black coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead. At 8 a.m. my tablet pinged. It was the file from Frank. I opened it. I expected it to be bad, but I did not expect it to be catastrophic. According to Frank, my son and his wife were not just in debt. They were underwater with an anchor tied to their ankles. David had leveraged his architectural firm to the hilt. He had taken out a second mortgage on their house and a third mortgage on a rental property that had been vacant for 2 years. Chloe had maxed out 6 credit cards. Together they owed nearly $4 million. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was the insurance policy. Frank had found it. A term life insurance policy on Victoria Vance. Face value $5 million. Beneficiary David Vance. Date of policy 6 months ago. I stared at the screen. $5 million. That was the price of my life. That was what I was worth to my own son. Enough to pay off their debts and still have enough left over for Chloe to buy a lifetime supply of red bottom shoes. And there was one more thing. A search history report from David's laptop. Symptoms of early onset dementia. How to get power of attorney for elderly parent. Average cost of assisted living Connecticut. Sunset Hills nursing home availability. I set the tablet down. My hands were trembling. Not from fear but from rage. They were not just going to kill me. They were going to gaslight me first. They were going to strip me of my dignity, my mind, and my freedom before they finally stripped me of my life. The doorbell rang at 10 a.m. I checked the security camera. It was them, David and Chloe. Chloe looked terrible. She was wearing big sunglasses inside the house, likely to hide puffy eyes. David looked like he was walking to the gallows. I put on my performance face, I slumped my shoulders, I took off my reading glasses and put them on top of my head. I grabbed my cane and shuffled to the door. Victoria, Chloe said when I opened the door. Her voice was brittle. We came to check on you after last night. Come in, I said, my voice wavering. I am having a hard time this morning. I feel a little foggy. They exchanged a look of predator seeing prey. They followed me into the living room. I made a show of looking for my glasses even though they were on my head. Where did I put them? I muttered, patting the table. I just had them. My mind is like a sieve lately. They are on your head, Mom, David said softly. Oh, I laughed a weak, confused laugh. Look at that, silly me, I forget things so easily these days. We sat down. Chloe refused tea. She probably thought I would poison it. Smart girl. How is Barb? I asked. She is stable, Chloe said. She woke up for a minute. She was confused. The doctors say it will take time. I nodded. That is good. I was so worried. You know, I have been thinking about last night. I don't remember much of it. It is all a blur. Did I give a speech? No, Mom, David said, leaning forward. You didn't give a speech. You seemed confused last night too. You were wandering around. You told Chloe you lost your purse when it was on your arm. He was lying. He was planting the seeds. He was trying to rewrite history to fit his narrative. Did I asked, widening my eyes. Oh dear, that does not sound like me. It has been happening a lot lately, Victoria, Chloe chimed in. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, but they were calculating. You repeat yourself, you forget names. We have been worried for a while. Have you? I asked. I looked down at my hands. I let my lip tremble. I am getting old. Maybe this house is too much for me. It is so big. I get lost sometimes. David grabbed my hand. His palm was sweaty. That is what we wanted to talk to you about, Mom. We want you to be safe. We want you to be taken care of. I looked up at him. I saw the greed behind the concern. I saw the $5 million policy reflecting in his eyes. What are you suggesting? I asked. There is a place, David said. A really nice place, Sunset Hills. It is not a nursing home. It is a luxury senior community. They have doctors on site. They handle all the cooking and cleaning. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. Sunset Hills, the place Frank found in the search history. The place where they put people they want to forget. I don't know, I said hesitantly. I love this house. Your father built this house, we know, Chloe said. But think about the peace of mind and, well, it is expensive. But we could help you manage your assets to pay for it. We could handle the finances so you don't have to stress about bills anymore. There it was, the hook. Hand over the money, hand over the freedom. Go sit in a room and wait to die. I stood up slowly. I walked over to the window. I looked out at the garden. I needed them to think they had won. I needed them to think I was weak so they would execute the next step of their plan. Maybe you are right, I said softly. I do feel tired. I feel so tired all the time, and last night, seeing Barb like that, it scared me. It could have been me. It could have been, Chloe agreed. Her voice was cold. I turned back to them. Okay, I said. I will look at the brochure if you think it is best. David let out a breath he had been holding. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who just realized he might not go bankrupt after all. We will bring the papers tomorrow, Mom. We can go visit the place on Tuesday. That sounds nice, I said. They left 10 minutes later. They practically skipped to the car. They thought they had broken me. They thought the poison failed, but the gaslighting worked. I watched them drive away. Then I walked into my office. I stood up straight. I threw the cane onto the sofa. I picked up the phone. Frank, I said when he answered. Yeah, boss, they took the bait. They are bringing the papers tomorrow. Power of attorney, Frank guessed. And the commitment papers, I confirmed. They are going to try to sign me over to Sunset Hills. What is the play? Frank asked. I need you to break into David's home office tonight, I said. Silence on the line. Breaking and entering Victoria. That is a felony. I know the alarm code, I said. It is his birthday. He never changes it. They are going to be at the hospital with Barb until late. The house will be empty. What am I looking for? Frank asked. I need the originals, I said, the insurance policy, the overdue mortgage notices, and I need his ledger. David keeps a physical ledger of his private debts, gambling debts. I need it all. And what are you going to do with it? Frank asked. I am going to throw a party, I said. A party, yes, a signing party. When they come tomorrow to make me sign my life away, I want to have a few documents of my own ready. You are terrifying, Frank said. I am a mother, I said, and I am about to teach my son a very expensive lesson. They arrived at noon carrying a box of pastries and a folder thick enough to choke a horse. I watched them from the kitchen window as they walked up the path. Chloe stopped to check her reflection in the glass of the front door, smoothing her hair and practicing her sympathetic face. David was looking at his phone, probably checking to see if the insurance money had miraculously deposited itself into his account yet. They looked like vultures in designer clothing circling a carcass they thought was already dead. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. I was wearing my oldest cardigan, the one with the moth hole in the sleeve, and I had left my hair uncombed. I wanted to look like I was unraveling. Mom, David said, stepping inside. You look tired. Did you sleep okay? I didn't, I whispered, stepping back to let them in. I kept hearing noises. I thought someone was in the house. I checked the locks 3 times, David. I was so scared. Chloe made a sad clucking sound with her tongue. Oh, Victoria, she cooed. That is exactly what we were talking about. The paranoia, the confusion. It is not safe for you to be here alone anymore. They led me into the sunroom. It was my favorite room in the house, filled with the orchids I had been raising for 20 years. Chloe pushed a stack of magazines off the coffee table without asking and spread out her brochures. They were glossy and bright, featuring pictures of silver-haired people laughing at salad. Look at this place, Victoria, Chloe said, tapping a picture of a swimming pool. Sunset Hills, it is like a resort. They have water aerobics. They have a movie theater. You would never have to be lonely again. I put on my reading glasses and peered at the brochure. I noticed the fine print immediately. Tier 1 facility. Locked ward available. Asset liquidation assistance. It wasn't a resort. It was a warehouse for the unwanted. It looks expensive, I said, my voice trembling. I don't know if I can afford this. My liquid assets are tied up in the trust. That is why we need to do this today, David said, sliding a heavy document across the table. He uncapped a pen. This is the power of attorney, Mom. It just gives me the authority to unlock the trust so we can pay the deposit. It is just a formality. I looked at the document. It was sweeping. It gave him power over my real estate, my bank accounts, my medical decisions, and even my digital assets. If I signed this, he could sell my house tomorrow and put me in a state facility the day after while he kept the Sunset Hills money for himself. I reached for the pen. My hand shook violently. I let the pen drop to the table. I can't, I whimpered, my hand. It just won't work today. I feel so weak, David. Is it hot in here? Chloe exchanged a look with David. Impatience was starting to crack through her veneer of concern. Here, let me help you, she said. She reached out and wrapped her hand around mine, forcing my fingers to grip the pen. Just a simple signature, Victoria, right on the line. I looked at her hand, the same hand that had poured poison into my champagne glass 48 hours ago. I felt a surge of revulsion so strong I almost vomited. I pulled my hand away. No, I cried out, dropping the pen again. Not yet, I need to read it first. I promised your father I would always read before I signed. David sighed loudly. Mom, it is standard legal jargon. You wouldn't understand half of it. We already read it for you. I know, David, I said, looking at him with watery eyes. But I just want to do it right. Can't we do it tomorrow? I am so tired today, my head is spinning. Chloe's eyes narrowed. We can't wait, Victoria. The room at Sunset Hills will be gone by tomorrow. There is a waiting list a mile long. If we don't put the deposit down today, you lose the spot. I looked from one to the other. They were pressing hard. They were desperate. They needed this signature like they needed oxygen. I will tell you what I said, leaning back in my chair. I will sign it, but not like this, not in a rush. This is a big decision. I am giving up my home. I am giving up my freedom. I want to do it with dignity. What do you mean? David asked. I want a party, I said. A party, Chloe repeated, her voice flat. Yes, I said. A signing party, just a small one, tomorrow afternoon. You bring the notary, you bring the papers, I will make tea. We will have a nice afternoon and then I will sign everything over to you. I just want one last day as the lady of the house. Is that too much to ask? David looked at Chloe. He was calculating. One more day meant 24 more hours of interest on his debts, but forcing me now might make me snap. He needed me compliant. Fine, David said. Tomorrow, but Mom, you have to promise. No backing out, no forgetting. You sign the papers tomorrow at 2 p.m. I promise, I said. 2 p.m. They stood up to leave. They left the brochures on the table like a threat. Oh, and Mom, David said, pausing at the door. Do not go into the kitchen. Why, I asked. We found the gas on, he lied. You must have bumped the stove. We turned it off, but just stay out of there, okay? We don't want an accident. Gaslighting, literal gaslighting. I will be careful, I said. As soon as they were gone, I dropped the act. I walked to the kitchen. The stove was off. It had been off all morning. I picked up my phone. Frank, I said. Did you get it? I got it, Frank said. And Victoria, you are not going to believe what I found in his safe. Tell me, I said. He has a second ledger, Frank said. Not just debts. He has been taking loans from loan sharks, the kind who break kneecaps. He owes a guy named Vinny 200 grand, and the due date is… Let me guess, I said. Tomorrow. Bingo, Frank said. That is why they are pressing you. If he doesn't pay by Friday, he is in serious physical danger. Good, I said. Good, Frank asked. Yes, I said, because I am going to invite Vinny to the party. I met Frank at a diner on the edge of town. The kind of place where the coffee tastes like battery acid and the waitress calls everyone honey without looking them in the eye. I was dressed in a trench coat and a silk scarf, looking like a spy from a bad movie, but I didn't care. Frank was already there, squeezed into a booth, nursing a slice of cherry pie. He slid a manila envelope across the sticky table. It was heavy. That's the original ledger, Frank said, keeping his voice low. Your boy David is meticulous, I'll give him that. He logged every penny he borrowed from Vinny, dates, amounts, interest rates. He even logged the VIG, the penalty fees. I opened the envelope just enough to see the handwriting. It was David's jagged scrawl. October 12th, borrowed 50K, due November 1st, consequence broken fingers. He had written consequence broken fingers right there on the page. My stomach churned. My son wasn't just a thief, he was a fool who played with sharks. And the insurance policy, I asked. Right underneath, Frank said. Signed by both him and Chloe. It's a rush policy. High premium, immediate payout. They specifically waived the 2-year suicide clause and the contestability period for accidental poisoning. They were covering their bases. Smart, I said, cold fury settling in my chest. But not smart enough. Victoria, Frank said, leaning in. About Vinny. You sure you want him at the house? This guy breaks legs for a living. He's not exactly Tea Party material. He wants his money, Frank, I said, tucking the envelope into my purse. And tomorrow at 2 p.m. my son is going to think he's getting $5 million. Vinny will want to be there to collect. I'm just facilitating the transaction. You're using a mob enforcer as a party guest, Frank chuckled, shaking his head. Remind me never to cross you. Good policy, I said. I left the diner and drove to the police station. This was the hardest part. I had to turn my own flesh and blood into a case number. I met with Detective Miller, no relation to Barb, who had handled the initial report from the hospital. I laid it all out. The toxicology report from the hospital which confirmed Oleander, the witness statement I had written out, and now the financial motive provided by Frank. This is a lot, Mrs. Vance, the detective said, looking through the stack. Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud. I know, I said, gripping my cane. I want them arrested, but not yet. I want them arrested tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. at my house. Why the delay? The detective asked. Because they are bringing a notary, I said. They are going to try to force me to sign a power of attorney. If you arrest them now, it's just attempted murder. If you wait until they try to make me sign, it's also elder abuse, coercion, and financial fraud. I want the charges to stick so hard they never see the sun again. The detective looked at me with a mixture of respect and fear. Okay, we'll have a unit in the unmarked van down the street. You give the signal. The signal will be when I smash a teacup, I said. The next morning, the day of the signing party, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. The fear was gone, the sadness was gone. I was in execution mode. I spent the morning preparing the house. I polished the silver. I set the table with my best china. I arranged fresh flowers. Lilies, ironic and beautiful. I wanted the house to look perfect. I wanted them to walk into a scene of domestic bliss thinking they had one. At 1 p.m. my phone pinged. It was a text from Chloe. On our way, bringing the notary and some champagne to celebrate. Hugs and kisses. Champagne, the audacity of that woman. She was bringing the weapon back to the scene of the crime. At 1:30 p.m. I heard a car pull up. I checked the camera. It wasn't David and Chloe. It was a black SUV with tinted windows. A man stepped out. He was wearing a tracksuit and a heavy gold chain. He looked like a caricature, but the way he walked, heavy, purposeful, was terrifyingly real. Vinny. I opened the front door, Mrs. Vance, he asked. His voice sounded like gravel in a blender. Mr. Vinny, I said, opening the door wide. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Please come in. I believe my son has something for you. He stepped inside, looking around the foyer with a sneer. Nice place. David told me he was good for the money, but he didn't tell me his mommy was loaded. He forgets a lot of things, I said. Now, if you wouldn't mind waiting in the library. I want it to be a surprise. Vinny grinned. It wasn't a nice grin. I love surprises. I shut the library door on him. The trap was set. The police were down the street. The loan shark was in the library. The evidence was in the safe. At 1:55 p.m. David and Chloe pulled up. They walked to the door beaming. David was holding a bottle of Dom Perignon. Chloe was clutching the notary's arm, practically dragging the poor woman up the steps. I took a deep breath. I adjusted my cardigan to look frail. I practiced my tremor. Showtime, I whispered. I opened the door. Welcome, I said, my voice shaking. Come in, come in. The tea is hot. David kissed my cheek. Today is a new beginning, Mom, he said. Yes, David, I said, looking him dead in the eye. It certainly is. You know, there is a special kind of silence that fills a room right before a guillotine drops. It is not quiet. It is breathless. That was the air in my living room at 2:05 p.m. David and Chloe sat on the velvet sofa, their knees touching, vibrating with nervous energy. Across from them sat the notary, a woman named Miss Pringle, who looked like she would rather be getting a root canal than witnessing a family treason. She had her stamp ready on the coffee table next to the stack of legal documents that would strip me of my rights. I poured the tea. My hands were steady now. I had dropped the frail old woman act just a fraction. Enough to make them uncomfortable, but not enough to make them run. Sugar, David, I asked, holding the tongs. No, Mom. Just sign, David said, tapping his foot. The bank closes at 4. We need to wire the deposit to Sunset Hills today. Patience, dear, I said, dropping a cube into his cup with a splash. We promised a party, didn't we? A celebration of my new life. Chloe forced a smile. It looked painful. We did, Victoria. But maybe we can celebrate after the paperwork is done. Miss Pringle charges by the hour. Oh, I have plenty of money, I said, looking at Chloe. Or at least I do right now. Who knows what will happen tomorrow? I sat down in my wingback chair facing them. I picked up the power of attorney document. I put on my glasses slowly. You know, I said, scanning the first page. This reminds me of when you were a boy, David. Do you remember when you forged my signature on your report card in the 5th grade? David froze. Mom, why are you bringing that up now? Because you were so bad at it, I said, looking over the rim of my glasses. You used a blue pen, I always used black. It was the details that caught you. I flipped the page, and you, Chloe, I turned to her. You remind me of my first business partner. She was very ambitious. She tried to embezzle from the escrow account. Do you know how I caught her? Chloe swallowed hard. No, Victoria, how? She got greedy, I said. She tried to take too much too fast. If she had just taken a little, I might never have noticed. But she wanted it all. The room went dead silent. Miss Pringle shifted in her seat. Mrs. Vance, if you are uncomfortable signing. Oh, I am perfectly comfortable, Miss Pringle, I said. I just want to make sure everyone understands the terms. David, this document gives you control over my life insurance, doesn't it? It covers everything, Mom, David said, sweat beading on his forehead. Standard boilerplate. Right, I said, because I was looking at my policies this morning, and I found a new one. $5 million, taken out 6 months ago. David stopped breathing. Chloe gripped her purse so hard her knuckles turned white. I don't know what you're talking about, David stammered. Maybe Dad took it out years ago. No, I said, my voice dropping an octave. You took it out, David, you and Chloe. And you waived the contestability period for accidental poisoning. The word poisoning hung in the air like smoke. Miss Pringle looked up, alarm in her eyes. Poisoning? Just a figure of speech, Chloe shrieked, her laugh high and hysterical. Victoria is so dramatic. She watches too many crime shows. David, give her the pen. Let's get this over with. Yes, the pen, I said. I reached into my bag. But I didn't pull out a pen. I pulled out the manila envelope Frank had given me. I have a gift for you first, I said. A going-away present. Since I am going to the resort, I won't be needing these anymore. I slid the envelope across the table. It hit the power of attorney papers with a heavy thud. What is this? David asked. Open it, I commanded. David reached out. His hands were shaking so badly he tore the flap. He pulled out the stack of papers. The first thing he saw was the photo Frank had taken of his secret ledger, the one detailing his debt to the mob. David's face went gray. He looked like he was having a stroke. He dropped the paper. It floated to the floor, landing face up. Oh, Vinny, 200K deadline today. Chloe leaned over and saw it. She gasped, David, what is this? And keep going, I said. The next one is the credit card bill for the Oleander extract you bought online, Chloe. Shipped to your P.O. box. Chloe let out a strangled sound. She tried to grab the papers, but I slammed my cane down on the table. Crack! Sit down, I barked. They both froze. The frail old woman was gone. The seal was back. You thought I was senile, I hissed. You thought I was a confused old bat you could drug and shove into a home. I built an empire while you were still learning to tie your shoes. I know everything, the debt, the insurance, the poison. Miss Pringle stood up, gathering her bag. I think I should go. This seems like a family matter. Sit down, Miss Pringle, I shouted. You are the witness. Witness this. I stood up and pointed at the library door. David, I said, my voice dripping with ice. You have a guest, what David whispered. He was paralyzed with terror. A guest, I repeated. He said he knows you. He said he has an appointment with you today. Something about a deadline. The color drained from David's face completely. No, he breathed. Mom, you didn't, you couldn't. I invited him, I said. I thought since you were getting all my money today you would want to pay your debts immediately. I walked over to the library door. I grabbed the handle. David scrambled off the sofa, falling to his knees. Mom, don't. Please, he'll kill me. He'll break my legs. Better your legs than my heart, David, I said. I threw the door open. Vinny stepped out of the library. He filled the doorway a wall of muscle in a velour tracksuit. He wasn't holding a weapon, he didn't need to. He was holding a half-eaten scone I had left on the desk. He finished it in one bite, wiping the crumbs on his chest, his eyes locked on my son. David, Vinny said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated the china cabinet. You're late, my money was due at noon. David scrambled backward on the Persian rug, knocking over the coffee table. The power of attorney papers scattered like confetti. Vinny, I didn't know you were here. I have the money coming, I swear. We're signing the papers right now. Vinny walked into the room, stepping on the documents with his heavy sneakers. He looked at Chloe, who was pressed against the back of the sofa, trembling so hard her jewelry rattled. Then he looked at Miss Pringle, the notary. You the bank lady? Vinny asked. I am a notary public, Miss Pringle squeaked, clutching her stamp to her chest like a shield. I am just here to witness a signature. Then witness this, Vinny said. He reached down and grabbed David by the lapels of his expensive blazer. He hauled him up like a rag doll. This guy owes me 200 large, and he told me his mommy was gonna pay it. Is that right, David? Is mommy paying your tab? David gagged, his feet dangling inches off the floor. Yes, yes, she's signing. Mom, tell him you're signing. He looked at me, his eyes bulging, pleading for his life. I sat in my wingback chair, calm as a lake. I picked up my teacup. I don't know, David, I said, blowing on the steam. I am feeling very conflicted. On one hand, I don't want your legs broken. On the other hand, you did try to kill me. We didn't, Chloe shrieked from the sofa. It was an accident. Mom drank the wrong glass. Stop lying, I shouted, slamming the cup down on the saucer. The sound made everyone jump, even Vinny. If you want me to save him from this man, you will tell the truth right now. In front of God and Miss Pringle. Vinny tightened his grip. David's face was turning purple. Talk, David, Vinny growled, or I start breaking fingers. I charge extra for thumbs. David broke. He shattered right there in the foyer. It was Chloe, David choked out. It was her idea. She bought the Oleander. She said it would look like a heart attack. You coward, Chloe screamed, lunging at him. You agreed to it. You drove me to the P.O. box. You mixed the powder. Because you said we'd lose the house, David yelled back, flailing in Vinny's grip. You said Mom had lived long enough. You said 5 million was enough to fix everything. Miss Pringle gasped, dropping her stamp. She looked horrified. She had just witnessed a confession to conspiracy and attempted murder. There, I said, setting my tea down. Was that so hard? I looked at Vinny. You can put him down now, Mr. Vinny. Vinny dropped David. My son collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air, rubbing his throat. So Vinny said, turning to me, I heard the confession. Cute family you got here. Now about my money, you signing that paper or what? I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. I walked over to the scattered papers on the floor. I picked up the power of attorney document. David looked up at me, hope warring with terror in his eyes. Mom, please. Just sign it. Pay him. We'll go away. We'll never bother you again. I looked at the document. Then I looked at my son. I told you, David, I said softly. I promised your father I would always read before I signed. And I promised myself I would never negotiate with terrorists. I ripped the document in half. Then I ripped it again and again until it was just a pile of confetti in my hand. I let the pieces flutter down onto David's head. You're not getting a penny, I said. And neither are you, Mr. Vinny. Vinny's face darkened. He stepped toward me. Lady, you don't play games with me. If you don't pay, the debt rolls up to the next of kin. Oh, I'm not worried, I said, because I invited some other guests too. I picked up my teacup, the delicate bone china with the painted violets. Miss Pringle, I said calmly, you might want to cover your ears. I hurled the teacup at the fireplace. Smash! The sound of shattering china echoed like a gunshot. Before the shards hit the floor, the front door burst open. Police, nobody move! Detectives poured into the hallway, guns drawn. They had been waiting in the van listening to the wiretap Frank had installed, waiting for the signal, waiting for the confession. Hands in the air, Detective Miller shouted, aiming his weapon at Vinny. Drop to your knees. Vinny cursed, raising his hands. David stayed curled in a ball on the floor, sobbing. Chloe tried to run toward the back door, but two officers tackled her before she made it to the kitchen. Miss Pringle had fainted dead away on the sofa. I stood in the center of the chaos, leaning on my cane. I watched as they handcuffed my son. I watched as they dragged my daughter-in-law screaming out the door. I watched as they escorted the loan shark away. David looked back at me as they hauled him up. His face was a mask of betrayal. Mom, he wailed, you set us up, you trapped us. I walked over to him. I leaned in close so only he could hear. I didn't trap you, David, I whispered. I just let you walk into the grave you dug for me. I turned my back on him. Get them out of my house. The silence that follows a police raid is heavy. It smells of gunpowder residue and shattered illusions. After the last squad car pulled away, taking my son, his wife, and their hired thug to the county lockup, I was left alone in my foyer. The tea was cold. The china shards were still scattered on the rug. The power of attorney confetti littered the floor like snow. Frank walked in through the back door. He had been listening from the van the whole time. He stepped over the mess and whistled low. Remind me never to forget your birthday, Victoria, he said. Help me clean this up, Frank, I said, pointing to the broken teacup. I have a hospital visit to make. I arrived at St. Mary's an hour later. The doctors had taken Barb off the ventilator. She was awake, groggy, and confused. When I walked into the room, she tried to sit up. She looked terrible. Gray skin, hollow eyes. But she was alive. Victoria, she croaked. What happened, Chloe? Chloe said you gave me the drink. I pulled a chair up to the bed. I sat down and folded my hands over my cane. This was the loose end. I could lie to her. I could tell her it was all a terrible accident, but I was done lying. I did give you the drink, Barb, I said calmly, because your daughter poisoned it and she intended it for me. Barb stared at me, her mouth opened and closed. What? No, Chloe wouldn't. She loves you. Chloe loves my money, I corrected. She and David are in debt up to their eyeballs. They took out a $5 million insurance policy on me. They were going to kill me to pay off a loan shark. I switched the glasses, Barb. I knew you had the constitution of an ox. I took a calculated risk. Barb looked horrified. Tears welled up in her eyes. You used me as a food taster. I used you to catch a murderer, I said, and I saved my own life. I am sorry you got hurt, Barb, truly. But if I hadn't switched the glass, I would be dead and your daughter would be a successful killer. This way you are alive and she is in prison where she can't hurt anyone else. Barb sank back into the pillows. She cried for a long time. I sat with her. I handed her tissues. I didn't offer empty comforts. What happens now? She asked, finally wiping her nose. Now, I said, reaching into my purse, I make it right. I know Chloe drained your retirement account last year. I saw the records in David's safe. They stole from you too. I pulled out a check. I had written it that morning. This is for $100,000, I said, placing it on the bedside table. Consider it a hazard pay bonus. It covers your hospital bills, your retirement, and a very nice cruise to get away from the shame of the trial. Barb looked at the check. Then she looked at me. She didn't tear it up. She picked it up and held it tight. Money doesn't fix a broken heart, but it certainly makes the healing process more comfortable. Thank you, she whispered. Get well soon, I said. The trial took 6 months. It was the scandal of Connecticut. The birthday poisoning, the papers called it. David and Chloe turned on each other immediately. David claimed he was a battered husband forced into it by a shopaholic wife. Chloe claimed she was coerced by a gambling addict husband. They ripped each other apart on the stand, exposing every ugly secret, every lie, every theft. I sat in the front row every day wearing my best suits. I listened to the testimony. I watched the video evidence Frank had gathered. I watched the notary Ms. Pringle testify about the confession. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraud, elder abuse. The judge was not lenient. David got 20 years. Chloe got 25 because she was the one who poured the powder. Vinny got 10 for extortion. At the sentencing hearing, David looked at me one last time. He looked thin. The prison food clearly didn't agree with him. "Mom," he mouthed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mouth anything back, I just nodded. Acknowledged but not accepted." I walked out of the courthouse and felt the sun on my face. It was spring now. The winter was over. 2 weeks after the sentencing, I sat in the office of my attorney, Charles. He was a good man, boring as oatmeal, which is exactly what you want in a lawyer. The mahogany desk was covered in paperwork. The sun was streaming through the window, illuminating the dust motes. It was a peaceful scene, the exact opposite of the chaos that had consumed my life for the last 6 months. "So," Charles said, looking over his spectacles, "we are liquidating the trust." "Every penny," I said. "David and Chloe spent years waiting for me to die so they could have this money. They treated my bank account like a countdown clock. I think it is time the money did some good for the living." I signed the papers. I sold the estate. I sold the furniture. I sold the silver tea set minus the one broken cup. I even sold David's golf clubs. I purged my life of everything that reminded me of the son who tried to sell me out. "And the beneficiaries?" Charles asked, pen hovering over the new will. "I want to set up a foundation," I said. "The Victoria Vance Fund for Elder Justice. It will provide legal defense for seniors who are being exploited by their families. It will hire private investigators like Frank to find hidden ledgers. It will hire tough lawyers to fight guardianship claims." Charles smiled. "That is very specific." "It is necessary," I said. "And one more thing. I want a small stipend sent to the prison commissary for David." Charles looked surprised. "You do?" "Yes," I said. $50 a month. Enough for toothpaste and maybe a candy bar. I want him to remember that I am still taking care of him just like he wanted. But I want him to know that $50 is exactly what he is worth, and the rest, I am spending it," I said. "I booked a ticket to Paris, then Tokyo. Then maybe I will go see the penguins in Antarctica. I am going to spend every dime of my hard-earned money on expensive wine, first-class tickets, and experiences that make my heart race in a good way." I left the office feeling lighter than air. I moved into a sleek condo in the city. It has a doorman and security cameras on every corner. No one gets in without my permission. I have new friends now, women like me who have survived wars, both foreign and domestic. We play poker, we drink wine ice-free, we laugh about the men who underestimated us. I did visit David once, just once. It was 6 months into his sentence. We sat on opposite sides of the glass partition. He looked older, the gray was starting to show in his hair. He looked at my Chanel suit and my tan. "You look good, Mom," he said, his voice tinny through the phone. "I feel good, David," I said. "Do you hate me?" he asked. He looked like a child again, looking for reassurance. I looked at him. I searched my heart for hatred. I searched for anger. But all I found was a quiet, empty space where my son used to be. "I don't hate you," I said. "To hate you, I would have to respect you enough to care. I just pity you. You had it all. You had a mother who loved you. You had a future. And you traded it all for a shortcut that led off a cliff." "I can change," he said, "when I get out. Maybe we can start over." I stood up. I hung up the phone. I placed my hand on the glass for a brief second. "Goodbye, David," I said. I walked out of the prison and didn't look back. I hear Barb is doing well. She took the cruise. She met a retired dentist from Florida and they are living in Boca. She sends me Christmas cards. She never mentions Chloe. We have a silent agreement we survived them and that is enough. Last week I celebrated my 71st birthday. I didn't have a big party. I didn't have champagne. I went skydiving. Yes, you heard me. I strapped myself to an instructor named Chad and jumped out of a perfectly good airplane at 10,000 feet. As I fell through the sky, the wind screaming in my ears, the ground rushing up to meet me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt alive. I realized then that David and Chloe tried to take my life because they thought it was almost over. They thought I was done using it, but I was just getting started. So ladies, if you take anything away from my story, let it be this. Watch your drinks, watch your bank accounts, but most importantly, watch your own worth. Do not let anyone, not your children, not your society, not your mirror, tell you that you are done. You are not done until you say you are done. And me, I am just turning the page. What did you think of that ride, friends? Did I go too far with the loan shark, or was it exactly the kind of justice David deserved? I know some of you might think a mother should forgive anything, but I believe a mother's job is to teach consequences. Let me know in the comments below, would you have signed the papers or would you have thrown the teacup? And while you are typing, click that subscribe button. I have plenty more stories from the Bridge Club that will curl your hair. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your glasses full.